Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for this month's episode of Live from the Trevor Zoo. It's great to welcome you all to the zoo. I'm Ava Goodale from Millbrook School's class of 2001. I'm currently the chair of Millbrook's science department, and I also teach field biology, advanced biology, and oversee our students' independent science research projects. I make it a point to involve the Trevor Zoo into the classes I teach as much as possible. When I was a student at Millbrook, I was an active zooey. In fact, my senior year, I was the head curator. As a student, I remember thinking, if I was going to design a school from scratch, this would be it. My freshman year, I found myself not only at the zoo, but up in the canopy walkway, banding birds, meeting premier scientists like Jane Goodall, and even traveling to Peru with Bruce Rinker, who was the chair of the science department then. I'd always loved nature as a child, but Millbrook School helped me channel that into becoming a steward of the natural world, one of our core values as a school. After Millbrook, I attended Cornell University and graduated from there in 2005 with a degree in natural resources. In college, I was able to connect my interests about the environment with social issues. I had the opportunity to spend a summer with the Kaipo Indians of Brazil, where those connections were abundantly clear. After a career in conservation and management, I returned to Millbrook in 2014 and joined the science department. And in 2017, I became the chair of the department. I also manage our canopy walkway, help coach girls basketball, and am a faculty advisor. For the last 4 years, I've had the opportunity to run a community-based conservation workshop for teachers and students in Peru in partnership with the Morpho Institute and the indigenous Mayahuna people. All of these roles allow me to support our students today as they become stewards of the natural world themselves. Of course, the world today is more interconnected and globalized than it was when I was a student in the late 1990s. So my goal is to help students see their role as stewards in the context of their role as global citizens. Our beautiful 800-acre campus allows me to bring students outside to build their sense of place that is rooted in meaningful experiences. I can then relate those experiences directly or indirectly to what is happening elsewhere in the world. Today in my classroom, the indigenous Mayahuna takes center stage through a series of multimedia and interdisciplinary case studies. My hope is that students will re-examine their own practices and relationships to people and place, opening the door to see their own lives in the context of other worldviews, to see the familiar through a new lens. Ultimately, I believe that these experiences will create 21st century stewards who are connected to their local places and committed to solving today's most pressing issues with others around the world. One example of this is through citizen science projects like the Great Backyard Bird Count, a perfect example of 21st century stewardship. My students are learning about biodiversity monitoring in the Amazon and then actually getting involved through projects happening in their own backyards through iNaturalist and eBird. Just a reminder, please feel free to ask questions throughout today's episode. Type them in the comments and we'll answer them towards the end of the show. So, like many of you, I'm sure, I'm a birder or a bird watcher. And on today's live show, we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, ornithology, and specifically the Great Backyard Bird Count. The Great Backyard Bird Count is a citizen science project based around ornithology, the study of birds. The GBBC, as it is also known, is conducted annually in mid-February. The event is supported by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the National Audubon Society. During this 4-day event, birdwatchers all around the world are invited to count and report details of birds in the area in which they live. The data is collected, submitted online via the internet, and compiled for use in scientific research. The GBBC was the first citizen science project to collect bird sightings online and display results in near real time. It was first launched in 1988 in the United States, and since 2013, the event has been observed by international birdwatchers, and anyone can now participate in this event around the world. Last year in 2020, the GBBC had 268,000 participants who counted more than 27 million birds. 6,942 species of birds were identified across 194 countries. Data resulting from the GBBC has raised awareness about changes in population and habitats of common birds. This in turn shows us what's going on in our natural world on a larger scale and helps us as scientists identify issues of concern around the planet. When you put it all together, you begin to see just how important a simple hobby like watching birds can be. Okay, so it's very easy to participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count, and today I'm going to show you everything you need to know. But first, we're going to take a look at what birding is all about. And to show you that, let's join Dr. T and his animal behavior class, which just went bird watching the other day. Let's have a look.
Because we'll probably see starlings in pretty good numbers here at the zoo. Turns out the little grain kernels that we feed a lot of the birds, a lot of the waterfowl, the emus, the rheas, that turns out to be perfect food for the starlings as well. So they will flock in en masse, stealing food. Weirdly, that's what they're doing. And that means that we'll see lots of them together. So as we're doing the backyard bird count, if you're looking at a tree and you see like 100 sort of medium-sized birds, you can almost be guaranteed that those will be European starlings. And what you're trying to do there is get a good estimate of the number. For the backyard bird count, you're going to see that it's pretty hard to count numbers sometimes, like if you're in that band where you're looking at a bunch of starlings. So you do your best to try and count them quickly because they're going to be on the move. And if you're going to make a guess, under-guess as opposed to over-guess. It's better to know, better to be a little short than to be too high, okay? The other thing that you need to know when you're counting birds is you're counting the highest number of birds that you see at any one time. So if you're looking at a feeder and you see one northern cardinal male, and then a little while later you see a northern cardinal male, you don't know if it's the same bird or not. So that may still be the same bird. So you've got one bird so far in your count. Now, if you happen to see a female fly in, now you know you've got at least two cardinals because you have a male and a female and you can tell them apart. Or on the odd chance you see a second male fly in. They're pretty territorial, so if you do see them fly in, somebody's going to fly off away pretty quickly. But I see what that bird is.
I got it.
Did you guys see it or?
Keeps moving around.
Yeah. So that's a tufted titmouse. Now you're seeing what I was talking about the other day. When I send you a picture, of course, it's pretty easy to take your time to look at it carefully and see what kind of color it is and all that. As we get out in the field, the birds are like, no, not really. So it's a lot closer right now. That's a tufted titmouse. Luckily, the birds, most of the time that we're looking at, are not too afraid of us because they recognize that we're not predators. And so they'll kind of fly in, fly out, and be on the move, but they're kind of always moving. I stop here to remind us that we actually have a really amazing campus with lots of different habitat types. So as you can see, we're kind of at an evergreen forest. There's a bunch of spruces and pine trees up in here. Owls love that because an owl needs to kind of hide during the day, most of them, right? Because they're active at night. And so during the day, you don't want to get in trouble. You just want to be able to take a nap. The best way to do that is to hide. You're going to have a much better chance hiding in an evergreen during the winter because it still has all its needles on it than you are in one of these trees where we're going to be able to see you pretty well if you're in a tree, a deciduous tree where all the leaves have come off. So you almost never see these owls, but if you come out here recently, it's been around, 5:30, 6 o'clock. Particularly in here, you'll hear a woo, 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 kind of a really not very good singer owl. That's the great horned owl. And they don't have a very pretty song, and it's kind of but they're active in here. I have not found a nest, but owls are one of the earliest nesters, and we're probably about 3 weeks away maybe from them mating and laying eggs. And so we're hearing a lot of calling right now because the males and females are looking for each other and trying to say, okay, let's have our reproductive moment and lay some eggs, and then the males will kind of go do their thing, but the females are going to spend a lot of time then sitting on those eggs. And it's worth it if you come out here around 5:30 and just kind of walk up and down the road a little bit. You'll hear these owls almost every night right now, so pretty cool. The other owl that we'll hear a lot, but not so much here because the great horns are here, is the owl that goes, "Whoo, whoo, whoo, whoo. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you? Whoo, 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 whoo." That's our barred owl. And we have a lot of barred owls around as well. Oh, got a hawk of some, oh no. Yeah, what, yeah, that could be an eagle. I don't. Oh, sure, absolutely. Absolutely. The one rule about birding is everybody's a birder. So if I'm looking that way and there's a bird over here, I'm not going to see it, especially if it's not making noise. So, and like that's a great example. If I see that thing too late and I have very little chance of knowing what it is. But yeah, so definitely let us know. Now we're being fairly noisy right now, but it's because we're not actually looking at too many birds. When we get down toward where we're going to try and see some of the birds, we'll have to be pretty quiet because we want to keep them where they are. I'm not sure what that was. We're starting to get into that wetland habitat. The other thing I want to point out here is, see this tree, this sort of tall, skinny tree right next to the maple? See how it's kind of checkered like, and it's got some light bark and some dark bark? You know what kind of tree we're looking at? No. That's a white ash tree. What have you heard about ash trees in the news? You guys drive around and ever see those purple boxes hanging off trees sometimes? So those are traps, and they're obviously put up by humans. They're traps to try and catch a particular kind of bug. It's called the emerald ash borer. And it's a invasive species, and it's an ash borer because it specifically attacks ash trees. What we're looking at is not the damage from the bug. The bug is not what's doing that to the tree. The bug is going to kill the tree. So sadly, most of our ash trees are dying. But what is doing that is a woodpecker. Now, why would a woodpecker be attacking an ash tree that's going to die and has probably got emerald ash borers killing it? There's one good thing about the emerald ash borer, and it's if you're a woodpecker, they're tasty. So yes, exactly, they're eating those bugs, and to get to the bugs, they got to chip away that bark. And so you should be able to tell me as we go, oh, that must be another ash tree, because it's going to look just like this. And then every once in a while, we'll see an ash tree that doesn't look like that. It hasn't been attacked by an emerald ash borer yet, but probably sadly will be at some point. So again, pretty complex lives we lead as organisms on this earth. So
What kind of woodpecker would do that?
these pieces here are probably hairy woodpeckers and or the pileated woodpecker that is your large quest that some of you are desperate to find. Find the nest of, not the bird, because we'll probably hopefully see the birds. All right, here's where I did work for you guys last night, but here's also now where we have to be pretty quiet. We don't have a lot of time, so we're just going to go in here and watch the feeders for probably, 3-4 minutes and see what we get. As I say, at 9:25, we're kind of toward the end of the morning gas up, but we'll see if we see anything, and then we can head back up. So we'll just watch the feeders here. You can see we had quite a few birds, a lot of dark-eyed juncos, got some black-capped chickadees, blue jay. And you can see that I've got different kinds of feeders here. So, you know, one of the things that you're doing if you're trying to attract birds is you're trying to mix up what you're doing with your feeders a little bit, so you've got different kinds of food to bring in different kinds of birds. So remember, we're talking about those birds that had sort of an anvil beak. They're looking for seeds that they can crack open and get that juicy, fatty tidbit inside. Other birds with longer beaks that aren't quite so strong, they're not going to be able to crack that. So they're looking for little tiny bits of seed that they can just grab and swallow. Again, down here we're in a pretty open space next to the wetland area with a stream going through it. So we've got a lot of diversity happening. A lot of dark-eyed juncos on the ground. A lot of black-capped chickadees. You'll see that there are also sort of pecking orders. So the blue jays are kind of the bullies of the feeder. They're going to come in and chase everybody else out, eat what they want, and then leave, and then other little birds will come in. You'll see that the mourning doves, they have a hard time being up at the feeder, so they wait on the ground and they hope for whatever everybody else is going to drop. So they're hoping for sloppy eaters. And then, you know, in terms of counting, as you see, you know, these guys aren't going to sit here and wait very long. They come in, they grab a bite of food. They don't go very far. They go back to a bush like that where they can go in the bush, be safe, eat it, and then fly back and get another one and then come back. So they're kind of constantly on the move. And the only other thing I'll point out while we're here, and then we'll start to walk back up. You see this dead tree out here? If you look up at the top, it's got sort of two holes. That's a very active nest tree, and it seems like every year it kind of bounces back and forth. One year it'll be a flicker, a northern flicker. Another year it'll be a woodpecker. Another year it'll be a starling. So that, you know, that tells you how important these trees with holes are, these nest cavities. For those species that's what they're looking for, are cavity spaces. They're few and far between. Here comes the blue jay in, and he's up in the top of the tree, and he came in a little higher, so it didn't happen. But quite often, when the blue jays come in, if they come in lower, everybody else leaves for a second until they decide what's happening. Got a male downy woodpecker on the suet block right now. You can see that little red in the back of his head. Again, quite a few black-capped chickadees, some white-throated sparrows on the ground, a bunch of dark-eyed juncos on the ground. I can't count them because they're below the fence line for me, but you can begin to see the challenge in trying to count the number of birds that are there. It's the bird in the bush. I'll have to come back up a little bit. Starling on the feeder. It looks like a sparrow of some kind. I hopped down.
So as you can see, birding is fun, easy, and a great way to get outside and connect to nature. And it's an activity which is free and doesn't require any special equipment. However, there are a few things that make birding a little easier and more interactive. So let's discuss some tools you can use in the field to take your birding to the next level. First of all, a set of binoculars is certainly helpful. Many of the birds you'll be looking for are small or far away from you, so binoculars bring your view of them closer. These are my binoculars. For around $100, you can get a pretty good pair. Binoculars are often specified by a set of numbers, such as 7 by 35 or 8 by 40. The first number indicates the strength of magnification, which is the number of times the object is closer to you. These binoculars are 8 times. The second number is the size of the lens measured in millimeters. The higher the number, the more light will pass through that projects a brighter image. The higher the number, the bigger the binoculars will be and more expensive. Next up, I would recommend a field guide so you can identify the birds that you're looking for. These exist for different areas of the country and different parts of the world. This one here is the National Geographic Field Guide for Birds of North America. For my students, when I send them out in the field to do birding, I provide them with a kit that includes a very localized bird guide specific to the birds in New York and particularly birds here in Dutchess County. And of course, today, there are some great mobile applications for your smartphone that help you figure out what you are looking at. The go-to for identifying birds is the Merlin Bird ID app. It's free and easy to use. You can download it in the App Store, search for Merlin Bird ID by the Cornell Lab. Let's have a look at how it works. So once you open the application and you're looking at your bird, you just hit Start Bird ID, and it's going to ask you a series of 5 questions. So first, it just wants to know where you are. We are here in Millbrook, New York. Today's date. Then you want to know, it's going to ask you the size of your bird, and it gives you 4 benchmarks by 4 common birds. So it's going to give you a relative anywhere from a sparrow up to a goose. So let's say in this case, we're looking at a robin-sized bird. So we just click on that, hit next. The next question is, what are the main colors? So let's say we have a black, gray, and red bird. And you can pick up to 3, but you could also pick just 1 or 2. Again, you hit next. And then it asks you, what was the bird doing? And it gives you a series of options. So let's say in this case, our bird was found at our feeder, right in our backyard. So we click that, again, hit next. And it's going to generate a list of possible birds that we can then look at the images. We can click on it to see more information about it. But it helps us narrow down an entire book of options to just the few that are the most likely. And almost every time I use this, it's one of the first 3 that comes up. So in this case, a hairy woodpecker would fit that robin-sized with the red, gray or white, and black colors at a bird feeder. So there it is. This is my bird. So if you're old school, a notepad and pen will help you keep track of the birds you see while you're in the field. But of course, this too is now easy to do on your smartphone. eBird is a way for anyone around the world to store their birding observations, photos, or recordings and make them available to educators, scientists, and birders. The Great Backyard Bird Count uses eBird, one of the world's largest nature databases, with more than 100 million bird sightings contributed each year. So let's have a look at this video from the folks at eBird to show you how it works.
With eBird Mobile, birding has never been easier. This free mobile app works anywhere in the world, helping you quickly enter checklists while keeping track of your exact birding route, letting you just enjoy the birds. When you first install the app, you'll need to download a pack of information on what birds are expected in your region. Bird packs let you get a precise list of birds for your area regardless of your internet connection. The app will suggest the best pack based on where you are, and you can download other packs through settings at any time. Now you're ready to start birding. Typically, you'll be entering a checklist in real time, so the app knows the date and time you're starting. I want to record my track, so I'll leave that on. Tracking is a great feature that allows eBird to fill in where you're birding, how far you travel, and how long you're birding for. It keeps track so you don't have to. All right, you're all set. Now click Start Checklist. When you start a checklist, eBird uses your current GPS location and your bird packs to provide a list of expected species that are likely to be in that area at that time of year. You'll fill in this checklist as you go. Once you've found a bird you know, by sight or sound, the fastest way to add it is to type right here in the quick entry bar. Let's start with 2 mallards out on the pond. Type the number of birds, 2, and the species, mallard. Then select the species from the checklist, and you're all set. It's that easy. Let's enter a few more sightings the same way. There's 5 Canada geese foraging in the grass. Sounds like there's a red-tailed hawk calling nearby. And there's an osprey eating a fish. And a great blue heron flying overhead. You can see all the birds you've already tallied by switching to the checked view. This is particularly helpful for adding more sightings to a species. For example, you see 3 more mallards. Tap the number 3 times and you're all set. You'll notice some birds have these icons next to their names. These show whether a bird is infrequently reported or unreported for that region and time of year. By tapping a species name, you can make changes to your tally or add comments about the bird's field marks, its behavior, the habitat you saw it in, or anything else you find interesting. This is especially important for those rare and unusual sightings. You can see where you've been by clicking here to review your track. When you're finished birding, tap Stop. If you have an active track, eBird will ask you if you're done birding. Tap Stop Track to confirm. Now it's time to review your checklist. The first thing you'll need to do is add your location. The best way to do this is to use the map. It's important to choose a location that accurately represents where you were birding. You can either choose an appropriate existing location or create a new location by tapping on the map. In this case, you are birding at Sapsucker Woods, so choose that location. Next is info about your birding outing. This is what makes eBird tracking great. Tracking has already defined your checklist type based on whether you were moving or stationary. Tracking also fills in the duration and distance traveled. You can change your checklist type and edit the other fields if you need to. Before you can submit, eBird asks if you're submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify. Complete checklists are eBird's way of knowing you've identified and reported all of the birds you saw or heard to the best of your ability. It's not possible to detect every single bird. Nobody can do that. As long as you've listed all of the species you could identify, then check yes. You can also enter comments about your birding experience. You can document the weather, other animals you saw, or any other fun memories. Last, but not least, you can review the species you reported. When you're ready, click Submit. Congratulations, you're an eBirder. You're now part of the largest birding community in the world.
So there you go. Starting on Friday and this weekend, you can all participate in the Great Backyard Bird Count. I encourage you to go online to birdcount.org, learn more about it, download the apps on your smartphone, and get outside. If you come to the Trevor Zoo this weekend, we'll be handing out these bird sheets for free from our local Waterman Bird Club. On one side of the sheet has a checklist of all the native birds you might see here in Dutchess County. And on the other side, there's a selection of color photos of some of our more common birds that you'll find here in the winter. We're also having a special for our kids in our gift shop. If you have a little one in your pod and want to get them interested in birding and animal watching, we have these great little kids binoculars, which are only $10. And if you purchase those, it will get your child free admissions at the zoo. Okay, so let's hear your questions and I'll try my best to answer them to the best of my ability. If you have questions about the Great Backyard Bird Count, birding in general, or Millbrook School Science Department, just go ahead and ask in the comments here. So first we have a question from Peter. Peter is asking how students like him can be part of the GBBC. So if you're a student at Millbrook School, we have 2 classes that are participating. Animal behavior, like you saw. We'll be doing some work on this over the next few days. And then field biology will also be doing this on Monday. So if you're able to jump in those classes, Dr. T and I would definitely welcome you. If that doesn't work, you can go to the feeders at the zoo and by the science building and do your own contribution to eBird. It only has to be 15 minutes. So that's a great way just to take advantage of the bird feeders that we already have out. If you are a student elsewhere wanting to participate, I would suggest trying to get a group together, either in your family or a couple friends, and just getting organized with the apps and the website, maybe putting a bird feeder out if you don't already. And then again, just trying to contribute with at least 15 minutes. And if you get some more contributions in there, that's great. But the feeders really make it easy and accessible. And even if you put one out today, the birds will start coming really surprisingly quickly. And it's really entertaining to watch them come in. And you can get those recordings right onto eBird. All right, so we also have a question from Colleen. Colleen is interested in going on a bird walk similar to what our students were doing and looking for events in the future. So because of the pandemic, the zoo isn't having any public events right now, but we certainly hope to in the future. So if you're not currently a member, definitely consider becoming one, and we'll communicate about those future events and hope to keep doing those kinds of things. In the meantime, I would definitely suggest kind of taking advantage of this time to tap into some of the virtual classes that are going on. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology has a ton of awesome classes. I've taken 2 of them, and they're really good, high quality, super interactive. Even, there are classes on nature journaling related to birds. So that can really get you started and maybe practicing some of the skills. And then maybe this spring, as events start to open up, hopefully you can then add and join a group here at the zoo or some of our other local organizations. All right, Katie is asking why male birds are more brightly colored, which is a really fun question. And if you've ever watched, some of these nature documentaries, it's pretty entertaining to look at both male bird coloration, but also behavior. I hope you guys have seen, some of these birds of paradise, and bowerbirds, and they're just some spectacular footage of some pretty wild behaviors on top of these colors and crazy plumage. So what's going on there is basically sexual selection, which maybe you've heard of. But basically we call this sexual dimorphism. So basically the females look different than the males. And there's a female choice system going on there, which is basically just called intersexual selection, where the females are selecting a trait, whether that be brightly colored feathers or tail length, or a certain behavior, and they're selecting their mate based on those traits. So it's similar to natural selection as a mechanism of evolution. And over time, you can see those traits become more pronounced. And it's definitely something, if you look at Charles Darwin, he sort of wrote about the feathers of a peacock tail and how it was so perplexing thinking about natural selection, and that helped him and then many others sort of think of this other mechanism called sexual selection. So that's definitely a really fun topic to dive into. Okay, so Jessica is asking, what is the most amazing bird that I've seen? Let's see. So I'm definitely thinking of some of the birds that I've seen down in Peru. Mostly in the canopy walkway that they have down there, you saw some of the footage. But the birds down there, just like we were talking about, are so brightly colored, and they're often in mixed flocks. So the one that I always hope to see is called the Paradise Tanager, and it just has like 5 different colors, and it really just looks like someone painted it. So I love, those moments in the canopy or along the river where all these birds just start to pop out of the forest and you can start identifying them. So I guess I would have to say the Paradise Tanager at this point. All right, so I guess that is all our questions for today. So if you've enjoyed this episode, I'd like to remind you that you can view all of our previous episodes of Live from the Trevor Zoo on our YouTube channel, which is at youtube.com/Trevor Zoo Millbrook. And you can also watch our streaming cameras throughout the zoo 24 hours a day at www.millbrook.org/Trevor Zoo Live. Thank you for spending part of your Wednesday with us. If you're in the area, please come visit us in person. It's easy to make a reservation on our website, which is www.trevorzoo.org. We're open every day. We hope you'll come by this weekend for the great backyard bird count, and we'll be back here live from the Trevor Zoo next month. Thank you for watching. Bye.